weird thing. We had Bob Seger randomly start playing in the middle of Jesse's podcast. It's just like, but it was like lightly in the background, and we haven't figured out what it is. If you hear it, just let me know, please, so I can try to figure out what it's coming from.
It comes along. Yeah. Remember, what was the, what they play in Ozark? Remember that the kid just kept playing over and over again, and at first he was like, it's a great tune. And they heard it like 60 times, like in the same day.
No more fucking around. It's Wylde Style Radio. Wylde Style Radio.
What's up? What's up? And welcome to the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show with Whisk and Kev. We're coming to you live on a Wednesday night from the Salisbury Center Studios in Manassas, Virginia, on the Wylde Style Network, fueled by Monster Energy.
Woo woo!
What's up?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
You're looking dapper today. You got a haircut.
I did. I got a haircut.
Was it today?
It's not very metal, but
I don't know.
No.
Like you can go high and tight. There's a lot of high and tight metal guys.
Yeah, I have to hide the grays. Yeah, no, on Friday.
I take chemical means of hiding the grays.
I haven't sunk to that level yet.
If you ingest enough chemicals, then you forget that there's grays.
That is true.
Yeah. So there's several approaches to that.
For sure.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first show since we had the pleasure of Spread Eagle being here at the Salisbury Center.
We counted down. Remember we did the 1984 countdown.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we that was really kind of like our past conversations, past chats.
Yeah, no, and then Spread Eagle. So I was just saying, you wanted to recap that show, which I thought was phenomenal.
Yes.
They were great.
Of course.
Wish they had had more people here supporting them, but great guys.
I would love to see them come back again and again and again. So like, I will say that the musicianship of that show, like we can talk in a lot of ways to me about that show. First of all, the songs were great.
Yep.
So they were all originals that they performed that night. Or did they cover?
They did,
at the end.
They did a couple covers. They did the NXS cover.
Yes, that was it.
Which
Don't
was
Change.
awesome.
Yes. Which of course I love that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
How did I forget that?
Yeah.
but all of the playing, and then I have to, our producer was involved with running sound that night. So John, I got to give you love on that one because the room that they were in, because there's several rooms here at the Salisbury Center, was the best sounding I have ever heard that room.
Really?
Yes.
Yep.
I thought it sounded great. It's a tight space.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought it kicked ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I loved that performance, and you're right, like the nicest guys out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not pretentious in the very slightest, and it was just a warm feeling. Like they were enjoying the conversation.
Yep.
Both the one we did on Zoom with Jami and Rob, and then having Rick and Ray here in the studio the night of the show. It was fantastic. Yeah. So would love for them to come back and be able to get the whole band up here with us and chat and have another great show, and hopefully, get enough folks out here to put them in the big room.
There you go, fellas. So Spread Eagle, if you're listening, we know we name drop you from time to time, and especially in the newest posts where we were talking to you a lot. Love to see you again.
Yeah, and they're sharing and commenting and posting on a lot of the stuff on the page too, so that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a good time.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, what else is new?
I think that's what we're really kind of the theme of the day is what is new. We're really kind of pulled back because we were celebrating 40 years ago,
right,
with 1984. I think that we could probably, we could celebrate multiple decades. We kind of pull back and look at it. I think that's where today's conversation is going to lead.
Sure.
I feel, we're talking about recent heavy happenings.
Yep.
So, we've always talked about news, right? We've called it news, but I rebranded it if that was okay. We didn't really talk about it. I just called it heavy happenings.
Yes. And we got a little little slideshow, got some
AI art.
AI art.
Yes.
So yeah, which I want to talk about how we generated it. It's a cool image.
We didn't do a F and AI segment in a long time. This is
No.
where, like, when we were talking about F and AI, we really were kind of cursing AI and
Yeah.
all the other past experiences with it. But we actually generated, I think, a pretty good damn rock picture
Yeah.
to go with our heavy happenings.
Yeah. I don't know. Has it come up yet?
Coming up now.
All right.
All right. So yeah, well, there we go. Our beautiful piece of artwork that we, in a lot of ways, cheated on. Our friend Todd Spro would not approve.
No.
We could have approached Todd. So
But-
sorry, Todd.
But yeah, we don't have the talent that our friend Todd
Spro,
has.
exactly. Exactly.
It would be very much a stick figure, what we would see. But yeah, I thought it was cool. And, we had a little brief conversation about AI before we went live. And, I think that's a good use of AI,
Yeah.
where there's a lot of discussion these days about the bad uses or potential bad uses within AI.
Right. And we were talking a little bit before the show just to fill you guys in on the pre-show conversation. About basically a musician standing in and posing as a musician when they're not actually playing. Kind of the same as what you're hearing from Hollywood actors and guilds wanting specific laws and rules and regulations about their images and the way that they're
Right.
used inside of movies. This is the same thing we're talking about with songs. And you were talking about Beyonce specifically.
I was, and so I guess there was a letter that was released, I guess, to probably the Recording Arts Association of America, I think is what it was, where they a number of famous and some not as well famous musicians basically said it's time to take a stand. And when you have, and this was part of a story on the Today Show the other day, but when you have artists and the use of AI where you can basically emulate a musician. So they played a clip, I think it was Drake and Nas,
Yeah.
who I don't think have ever collaborated before.
Right.
But someone used AI to generate a song that matched their voices, and that's now out there.
Sure.
And it's, obviously ripping off the
Right.
artist.
Right.
We've had the conversations regarding streaming and such too, but
Right.
ripping off the artists. And it was interesting because the Today Show, their anchors were saying, "Oh, this is much needed, much like Hollywood did."
Right.
And then they came back and did a story about the new Beyonce album,
Yeah.
where a number of the songs, for example, she covered Blackbird by the Beatles, and
Right.
they gave her accolades for having Paul McCartney's guitar from that song be part of the
song.
recording,
Right.
which they didn't collaborate on that. So that's AI by a famous musician using that. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't-
Exactly.
I don't think it's good.
It's like we have talked a lot about backing tracks and live performances, and to me, like the AI is like backing tracks on steroids. It's even a more extreme because it's removing the creative process from the human, and basically generating it from then the computing technology. I don't know, I mean, you will say something like that, and you get somebody like Trent Reznor. That I think that we probably had this conversation about sampling to some degree,
Right.
20, 30 years ago.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
And whether that was a creative process from an artist, and you get a perspective, maybe like some people I think approach towards P. Diddy, who was Puff Daddy at the time, who people felt were just really just kind of like he was laying down lyrics, and his rap over top of just old riffs and
Right.
not changing the riff. But then you got somebody as creative as, say, a Trent Reznor that's taking these bites and pieces and rearranging them and then almost making a new riff out of old riffs somehow, some way. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to keep seeing how this plays out. If you have somebody that is like a Trent Reznor versus, not say anything bad about P. Diddy because I don't know enough about him to like necessarily complain.
Right.
To say that he was actually wrong in the way that he was sampling. But it's a little bit like that argument. It feels like that to me.
Sure. Yeah. And, I know in some cases, don't want to really name specific songs because I might not have the facts right. But, when you're sampling a Van Halen or another band, I assume there were times that, and there definitely were times that they weren't consulted or didn't approve
Right.
or weren't getting credit for the use of something they created
Right.
that were being used in hip hop and
Yes.
other music
That's the old rule with the Dust Brothers that I remember, hearing discussed. The Dust Brothers who produced Paul's Boutique from the Beastie Boys, basically, I've seen a number of artists kind of comment on that and say that record could never be made again because of the laws that were made after that record was created. It wouldn't allow for the amount of sampling that was done on that record, at least, or they could have done it, but it would have been a phenomenal cost, to all the artists that would be paid for that. And I don't know where that leads, with AI. Like if an AI generates something similar to a Van Halen riff, is that copyright or not? And
I guess that's what
go to.
They're high-paid lawyers to figure that out and fight that out.
Right.
But yeah, it certainly is a new avenue, I guess, of maybe stuff that's already been dealt with, but in a much different way, I think. Where it could be much, much more dangerous than helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. And that's getting back to Spread Eagle, just really their approach and their creative approach. I think they were really very clear in all of our conversations. This is all pure live. Everything about this is purely live.
Right.
We have no, really kind of technology backing up things that we do on stage. And then you go out and see a performance like they gave here, and the musicianship was just high quality. And you didn't need it in any kind of way.
No.
And that was just such, a great show to watch.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of, what we've been preaching. It's, live music is back, and get out there and catch the live music. And hopefully it is going to be more of that than some of the other shows we've talked about that maybe aren't 100% live.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
Awesome. So we're going to hit the heavy happenings.
Heavy happenings. So, so talk about some recent happenings here in April of 2024. And, maybe you do this, I do this, where we sit down and read the news as some dudes tend to do. And then you talk about the news almost in a barbershop kind of way.
Yeah.
And I feel like is really kind of happening right now with these heavy happenings. There's a lot, I will say, that Kevin and I talk about offline, so to speak, so not in front of you all. I think these are really kind of 4 highlights. But with that being said, we haven't necessarily discussed these topics in any big detail. So you guys get to see that firsthand. So I don't know what Kevin's going to say. He's not necessarily what I'm going to say. So that's our fresh take on all of this.
Yeah. And so John had it up here a second ago, but the first one came out just a couple days ago. Eric Gronwell has been dealing with some health issues.
Nice job with that name, because there's real umlauts in that name. We'll start there. So not Motley Crue umlauts that were just thrown on to be decorative and cool. He's actually Swedish. He won the Swedish American Idol, which I get a kick out of. And then he has real umlauts. And would it be Grunwald?
I guess it could be
Don't
Grunwald.
you like the shit out of everything with a couple umlauts?
I don't.
All right.
Eric Grunwald announced that due to some health issues and continuing to try and focus on his health, he was departing from Skid Row.
Leukemia, unfortunately.
Yes, he did have leukemia. He didn't say specifically that was it now, but I know they canceled some tour dates. There were some COVID potential things going on. And so they had, I think, 4 or 5 shows from their beginning of their tour for the new album that came out.
Sure.
The Gang's All Here. And so they canceled those and said they were going to reschedule them. And then this announcement came out that he was departing the band, but that Lizzie Hale from Hailstorm was going to fill in. And to me, I was a little taken aback by that.
Yeah, you did. You were shocked by that news?
I kind of, yeah. I mean, for me, Hailstorm is just kicking ass.
They're beasts.
And, they have a new album out. They announced tour dates. And then all of a sudden, they're like kind of putting that on hold. And she's going to go out on tour with Skid Row. So from that perspective, I was shocked by that. But I think it's going to be awesome seeing her doing some of the Skid Row tunes. Yeah,
like I thought about doing a "What's the Word" segment for this. You know what I mean? Because we could have put in and like done it in that approach. But I was hoping to have some more open conversation, because we've never really talked about Skid Row, and I wish that Jeff Salisbury, he's not a part of this episode, but he is a Skid Row fanatic. So I'm sure he would have a lot of good input in on his take on this. But you and I certainly loved Skid Row when they were in their peak. And I'm not saying that we don't love them now, but we fell in love with them for sure then.
Absolutely.
And it was always, to me, like my take on Skid Row, kind of looking back at it, and led that backstory. is that Sebastian Bach back then was the golden god. Remember how people, especially women, loved him? You know, he was beautiful. He had like the California blonde thing going on. He had a beast of a voice. And if you looked at him outwardly and you saw the videos, he was like the perfect front man.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like he was cut out of AI, you know, to be the front man that like anybody would want him to be. But you didn't see, at least in those days, before the internet and all that kind of stuff, the train wreck
that he is.
Right. And like, just, you know, for lack of better words, I don't think just the douchey stuff that he just does all the time. And I don't mean that he's a douche, but he does douchey stuff, you know, and that I think back at the time ultimately that, hold on a second, John's giving me a wave.
I have Mr. Salisbury on the line to join us in this conversation.
Yeah, like Skid Row lit him up.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this.
What's up, Lou?
We got a call in from the boss to talk about Skid Row.
What's going on?
Dude, we're talking about Skid Row. Did you know that, or did John call you?
John called me.
Oh, I love it.
You're saying that you wished I was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can hear in the background there's work being done still.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. So
It's not me vacuuming. It's trying to get ready.
All right.
got it. So we're doing a new segment called Heavy Happenings, and we were having a discussion about, Eric Gronwall from Skid Row announced he was leaving the band and that Lizzie Hale was stepping in to fill in. Four official dates,
but
right now. Then they came out another story the other day that she may extend and do more shows. So, I said I'm interested to see how she tackles those songs because she's a great singer.
Absolutely.
And so was Eric, but Whisk was just talking about Sebastian.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so that's really we're having this big conversation. We've never really talked about Skid Row before, and we were talking about I remember how much you loved Skid Row. We were really talking about those first two albums. And then I was just commenting on how much of a golden god, Sebastian Bach was for those first two albums. But you didn't really kind of know his personality. That was eventually kind of, to me, revealed in time. And now, like, kind of looking back on it, the word that I was using was douchey. That, like, he was certainly capable of doing douchey things, and not to call Sebastian Bach a douche, but he was where I was getting at was where there was the Raid commercial that was Kills Bugs Dead, and I think this ultimately ended his tenure with Skid Row, where he wore the shirt that said that AIDS in the height of the AIDS epidemic, AIDS kills fags dead. That's what he wore out in public, and it's kind of like, you're a golden god. You have a beast of a voice. You're in a crazy popular band, and why do you need to wear that shirt?
Right. Well, and to me, there was the incident where somebody threw a bottle at him.
Yes.
He threw the bottle back, ended up hitting somebody else.
Yeah.
Then went in the crowd to try and get at the guy that threw the bottle. And, and that was a huge deal.
Yep.
But it seemed like anytime a microphone was put in front of him by the media, he tended to want to be the guy. It struck me a little bit like David Lee Roth was at the time with Van Halen, and I think some of that is what kind of rubbed the other guys in the band raw to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But then Sebastian was kind of the same way, where he wanted to monopolize the media time and ultimately would say something or do something stupid.
Right.
That they're like, you know what? We're done with this.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think that all that stuff is, I don't know that he's douchey as much as that's who he is. And it's also, it shouldn't be a surprise to them because he probably was like undiagnosed ADD and, whatever, because we're older. So people with his kind of energy, just, they're like, oh, he's a douche or whatever. But really it's people who just have too much energy and not enough,
self-control.
The self-control, then also maybe their parents let them go, who knows? Like I always likened him to our friend who Kevin probably doesn't really know and maybe he remembers, but Shmoo.
Oh yeah.
Just like, and Shmoo was like the biggest hearted dude, but he just couldn't help himself because he was just out of control at all times because he was on 11 because of his ADD, but he wasn't douchey. He was actually one of the nicest people that I know. And we always talk about Porno Dan. Same thing. Dan was like always like at 11, and it's their personality. But I think the thing that everybody forgets is like you're surprised that the singer of a huge metal band is a spaz and like needs attention, and that's sort of what made him what he was because he needs that attention and that drive. It's like being surprised that Conor McGregor's kind of douchey. He's a fighter,
And look, I'm going to say it again. Wow. I'm not calling Sebastian Bach a douche. I'm just saying he did douchey things.
I know.
Another word, I guess, that could be stupid.
I know, but I mean that thing. It's like you shouldn't be surprised that the lead singer of a huge metal band is doing stupid things, especially back then, because that shirt wasn't politically correct back then, but it wasn't not politically correct because it was a different time. I mean, it was more accepted. Not that it was right, but it was more accepted. And I think that you have to sort of factor that in. It's like you're being surprised that a snake bit you. A snake is going to be a snake, or they're just being who they are, and it's part of what gets them to where they're at. Like him, Conor McGregor. Fighters are fighters. Metalhead guys are, sort of antisocial, like all that sort of stuff. And people that just have that extra gear, like those guys, tend to go over the top, and that's what some people love about them, and that's what some people hate about them. But it shouldn't be surprising to anybody, I don't think.
I think, though, that ultimately, though, like where I go with Skid Row is that we've always loved the band. And, I know the three of us have always loved the band. And I think that other people out there obviously love Skid Row. I mean, those first two albums and then, even subsequent music were really strong.
Yep.
And they never recovered from the Sebastian Bach. I have a list of people that sang with them. It's not just even about Eric Grunwald with the umlauts.
Right.
So like it would be nice for them to find some grounding and consistency. And however, with a new lead singer or, we out of all of this, out of all this attention, I'm sure you're getting to it. Sebastian Bach wants to return to Skid Row.
He does. He's been very vocal on that. And I think it just, in this day and age where we see, not all of them, the rumored reunions, but certainly where you got one guy who is saying, hey, now you don't have a singer and I'd love to come back. But the divide and the scars that he's created with those guys that they're not even thinking once about bringing him back. I mean, kind of shows, there's probably no amount of money that makes the original band reuniting going to happen.
Right.
Well, I mean, those things can be true. Like he's burned the bridges so they didn't want him back, but that also doesn't mean that he's replaceable because there's certain people that I think are irreplaceable. Like there's plenty of great singers, but there's not plenty of Sebastian Bach. Just like, and also his chemistry with the band, because at that time, Rachel and Dave and all those guys were also hellions too. Maybe not as much of a hellion as he was, but it was tolerable until it wasn't. And same thing. It's like saying, oh well, Alice in Chains, you can just replace Lane. It's been shown. I mean, as great as the singer is,
William Duvall.
Now I forget his name. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great singer, and he does a great job with the stuff. But he's not Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same thing with Sebastian. Is like you can have people who may even be a better singer, may be in tune better, but they're not Sebastian. They don't have the attitude. They don't have the growl. They don't have whatever. And also sometimes it's like the connection, or even like when people get older, like James Hetfield doesn't have the same sound that he had when he was in his 20s and he was angry and drunk.
Sure.
True.
So
I think like
they might be searching for something they're never going to get. Even with Sebastian.
Sure. Well, and like in that vein, I think that's where we're getting at with this conversation in terms of rooting for Lizzie Hale, because Kevin and I were talking about how much fans we are of Hailstorm and Lizzie Hale. I mean, I think Lizzie Hale's such a great student of rock and roll. Like she seems to know everything about hard rock and metal. It's amazing. Like, whenever she's hosting a show, that's a talk show, or she's hosting, there's video shows that you see on her, with TV, and she is well-spoken on everything. But I love the quote. I think it hits at the heart at what we're rooting for with the kids, Skid Row. And I have notes, Kevin. Did you notice that?
I see that.
I have notes today because I want to get Lizzie right. Said I started listening to Skid Row when I was a teenager growing up on the East Coast in central Pennsylvania. They were one of the only bands at that time that truly bridged the gap for my love of 80s big choruses and riffs, but had the same poignant dirt and grime that was seeping into my cracks of my mind during the 90s. I love you guys. There'll be blood left on the stage. That's the spirit you want.
Yeah.
You know, and looking at like the list of singers that attempted to fill in after Sebastian Bach, that debacle happened, you know, because they couldn't get that together. That's, to me, is the best thing I've heard of for Skid Row in any of the news since the early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's also the point that just because she replaces him and she's never going to, you know, catch that lightning in a bottle that he had doesn't mean they can't be good, because it's very rare. But, I mean, Van Halen did it with David Lee Roth and then Van Hagar, two very different sounds, but it worked. And then, you know,
AC/DC?
Look at Kevin. Yeah, I mean, AC/DC is probably the best example. But, you know, Kevin, boy, Ronnie James Dio and Sabbath, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
Like sometimes it works. It's just different.
Yeah.
And that might be what you'd have to look forward to with her, is like, it's going to be great, but it's going to be different. It's never going to be old Skid Row. And it probably won't ever be old Skid Row, even if Sebastian were to come back.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and she's got a ton of energy and she's got a great voice, but it's a different kind of style that she usually brings to the table. Yeah. So I think it'll, you know, like you said, it's going to be interesting and it's definitely going to be different, but
that's more like the AC/DC comparison. I mean, AC/DC, where they're similar but different, whereas Van Hagar and Van Halen were very different. But, you know, Ronnie James Dio and Ozzy were similar but different, you know. So maybe she's going to be closer to the Van Hagar, Van Halen. Maybe she's going to be closer to the, the AC/DC, where they have a very similar sound but distinct.
Right. Well, I mean, and I go back also to the documentary, that great documentary we watched last year, the I Want to Rock. You know, I think it's still on Paramount Plus.
Yep.
And it was, you know, about that time period, and Jake Sabo, Jake the Snake, you know, really spoke to that time period, and you know, the difficulty of the 90s and when that happened, when Sebastian left, and how they were trying, and his struggles with Sebastian Bach. He really was vocal about that, and even on taking him on in the first place, like, he was hesitant to begin with Sebastian Bach, which was very revealing,
right?
You know, with that conversation.
Yeah.
But either way, like, I feel like I remember an interview with Anthrax, and Scott Ian was praising Skid Row, which was a surprise to me, because I go back to Sebastian being the golden god, and there was a lot of shots from thrash metal bands at hair bands and glam bands at the time, and that was not the case with Skid Row. There was an acceptance there, and I agree with the Lizzie Hale quote. There is something grittier and grimier about their sound and their music, and it's not, to me, glam metal.
Well, the second album was complete divert, you know, it was a left turn, from what they were, and much heavier. I mean, they took Pantera out on the road with them. Right. That was the first time I saw Pantera, and, you know, they smoked Skid Row, but you know, it made sense based on that second album, and Pantera releasing their second album. You know, Pantera is a little heavier, but it made sense.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Well, thank you, Lou, for calling in on this one, because it's hard to have a heavy metal happening with someone I know that usually is chiming in on the show that I know would have loved that topic. Was I right?
Yep.
All right.
Definitely were. Unfortunately, work calls. So
I get it. Dude, I remember you were like Skid Row and Saigon Kick were probably neck and neck for you in like 90, 91.
Oh, yeah. And Badlands.
Yes, Badlands also. Yes.
Yeah.
Saigon Kick announced they're doing some shows together.
Yeah. I saw
coming up.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to see about the Salisbury Center. For
absolutely.
That's another. That's a kick for me that I don't care if I lose money.
I love it.
Awesome.
It's a big fancy concert ticket for you then at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I'm paying for the backstage passes.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
brother.
All right, guys. Appreciate it.
We
Yep.
love you.
See you soon.
Love you. See you. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. So the man did call in. Got to talk a little Skid Row with
There we go.
one of the biggest Skid Row fans that at least I know.
All right.
I'm glad he made it. So thanks,
Yeah, that
John.
was awesome.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like there's a common thread, at least in the first, topics that we're talking about. It's interesting that even Lou was talking about, really just changes in vocalists. Even if you have the same vocalist, how it can change over time, because we're getting to a heavy happening that we've talked about quite a bit
Yes,
over
sir.
the past year. But I just like the way that this was really approached, in this particular news story.
Yep.
And we're talking about, John, you're bringing up the next one. We're talking about the band Mudvayne, and specifically Chad Gray, who was the vocalist from Mudgrain, who made, I feel, a lot of great points about the recent status of Motley Crue.
Yes. And he said they should just bow out at this point. It is hard for me to watch.
Now, Kevin, do you feel that way? I mean, that's really, to me, the point. Do you agree? I think is the point of that article.
I think, well, it's interesting because in the article, he talks about what a huge Motley Crue fan he is.
Yes.
And obviously we've talked about that, and
Yeah.
we're monstrous Crue fans.
So hold on a second, because I got the quote. I think you
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head. My first cutting teeth metal record. It's so weird to even say the band name now, considering what's going on with that band. Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love, and Shout at the Devil. Just fucking absolute game changers.
Yeah.
And then along those lines, he compliments. You've got fucking guitarist Mick Mars, who is just fucking phenomenal. Just a great, 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 great player. I can't say enough about Mick.
Well,
I feel like we've said this. He dropped more F-bombs than we did.
well, just wait, because there's a few coming in than one of the other topics.
All right.
But anyway, I mean, so we've talked about it, right? It's like, I love John 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he's going to bring something to the band.
Yeah.
It's just not, I mean, Vince Neil's come in and out of the band. Tommy Lee's come in and out of the band. The two consistent pieces have been Nikki and Mick.
Yeah.
And I just don't, in my opinion, I'd go see him. I know you've
Okay, yeah.
seen Crew with John 5.
Yes.
But to me, it's not going to feel like Motley Crue.
That's what like Lou was just saying about the whole Skid Row thing. Even if Sebastian Bach comes back, it
Right.
might not feel the same way. Yeah, I feel like when I saw them with John 5, that was one of their first shows with them. In fact, I saw the second show with John 5, not the very first, but the second.
Right.
That was really kind of it. Like, it was curiosity. It was more of a, like a curious approach, as opposed to like,
Sure.
I'm going to like bring it with the crew. Like, you're hoping to get there,
Right.
but you're not quite sure.
Right.
So like, what's going to happen? And I've seen John 5 with Rob Zombie, badass, but I always like compare it to flavors, right? Like, especially booze. Like, I love Coca-Cola and I love vodka, but I'd never mix them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they're great on their own. They're great
Right.
by themselves, but like you mix them and you get in trouble, so that's kind of where I sit. Could be. I don't know if they mix together, but you have to taste it to find out.
It's like tequila with salt and a lemon.
Exactly.
Just drink the tequila.
Exactly. That's right. I would go with the salt. You know me.
I know you.
I like vitamins.
Yes. Well,
We'll call it that.
and electrolytes. But yeah, I mean, to me, the other piece to it is, and we've had plenty of conversation about the whole click track, backing tracks,
Yeah.
everything that's become Motley Crue now. It's like, I get his point, right? It's not Crue,
Right.
and it's certainly not. I don't care if Vince can't still sing,
Right.
but to get up there and do what he did
Right.
on that last tour, it's just disingenuous.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I mean,
Just-
I'm going to quote him some more. I think he, just like Chad Gray, like this article to me, several articles are just all full of quotes because he was just so well spoken in his rock and roll F-bomb kind of way. Tommy Lee can still fucking play. Tommy's a fucking beast. I mean, he will always be, but that's usually the way with drummers. They can usually stand the test of time. I get it with singers and shit like that. You lose some of your register and frequency, your pitch will drop. That's just fucking nature, because it's happened with me. My resonant pitch has definitely dropped. I can still get there, but it's weird. My register break is a little bit lower and different, so it does happen, but just like, come on, man. So I think that's his come on, man to Vince Neil.
Yep.
And that's what we've talked about. Is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, as that saying goes, is it enough to go back in and pay for that Motley ticket? Because Motley's not a cheap ticket. It
Oh,
never
no.
is.
Yeah.
You know, and is that worth it?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I think it was interesting because, you know, when I work out and I got the music going, you know, we've talked about it, like a lot of shuffle. Well, Hooligan's Holiday came up.
Yeah.
And I was like listening to it again. It's been a little while since I listened to it.
Yeah.
And Karabi was just awesome
It was.
on that album.
Yes.
And it's like, but even then, it wasn't Motley Crue.
Right.
It was a label on it with
Right.
3 of the 4 guys. It was great music. So,
And almost the problem, I feel like, goes back to the first quote that I read, you know, regarding Too Fast for Love and Shout at the Devil. Those are just unstoppable albums. So once you have that bar set, you're comparing everything to it, you know, and then I don't have the quote, you know, the direct quote, but, you know, Chad Graven commented on that. Like those 2 phenomenal albums, like even Theater of Pain that followed it, didn't match what was delivered in those 2 albums.
Right.
So you're still going to love the band, you know? Like,
yeah, but then, you know, then they had Girls, Girls, Girls and Dr. Feelgood, which were great albums.
Sure.
But since then, it's other than, you know, it wasn't Vince. But,
Yeah.
you know, the Motley Crue album was great with Karabi. But
Right.
then most of the other stuff has just been kind of a train wreck.
Yeah. So I'm going to close with the last quote that I have for him, which is, you know, that's, I would just bow out. Like, again, the title of the article. At this point, I would just bow out. It's not the same dude. I'm not the guy that fucking wants to sit and talk shit, but I have, unfortunately. It hits me in such a pure place, and to see it just kind of turn into a fucking whatever because it was such a big part of my life, it's hard for me to watch. And I think that's it. Like, I love the part about it. It's a big part of his life, and that I feel like happens when you fall in love with an artist or you fall in love with a song or an album. That's the bar that's set, and if it doesn't get back there, you're really pissed off about it.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, I guess we'll see the next time they come around.
Yeah, that's kind of it. I think I'm on hold, basically. Like, what are those ticket prices going to be? And it's really kind of ironic in some ways. Like, the last time we saw them was with Def Leppard. I almost feel like we can have the same conversation about Def Leppard.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily the quality of their musicianship deteriorating, but the songs,
the quality
have
of the
definitely changed.
music that they're playing.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm not willing to pay the kind of money that we had to pay for that show to see them play the same songs they played on that tour.
Right.
I love Def Leppard. Always will.
Right.
But if they're going to stay away from the early stuff,
Right.
then I don't really care to shell out that kind of dough to see them.
Absolutely. So, like, that's what I feel like, you know, this is where this story relates to the Skid Row story. Lizzie Hale's younger. So, you know, you have a younger, you may not have a physical deterioration
Right.
because playing music is a physical act, no matter how you're playing it. So there could be deterioration with an artist, but you're going to have as much of that with a Lizzie Hale coming in and doing Skid Row songs. But you're rooting for it to be at that high bar when you remember Skid
Sure,
Row at their
yeah.
peak. You know that's probably not going to happen with Motley Crue, even with John 5. You know, there was some wrong that was done, if we've talked about, to Mick Mars, and how can you not love that guy? You don't want to see him, you know, done
Yeah,
wrong.
right.
And that becomes a whole part of that saga. And that to me is the whole story then anymore. It's all about that and not about their music. But at the end of it, that's why you fell in love with the whole story to begin with, was because of those great songs on those first 2 albums.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Because I feel like the story then goes in lockstep with this conversation.
Oh, let's have it.
Over our next story. Like, isn't it kind of weird how it all came together like in the same week? Like, these stories were all just widespread across the media.
Yeah.
Basically about, like, maybe it's summer touring that's coming up. These artists and how they're approaching either new music or playing their old music to the best of their ability.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. And basically the article, and John, okay, there we go. We got the title. Basically, it's Eddie Vedder. I can't see the title because my eyes are just failing, I guess. But I'll subtitle it. I'll paraphrase it. So sorry if I don't get it exactly right. But it's basically about Eddie Vedder's passion for playing music and how much longer Pearl Jam can continue to produce new music, and basically where he stands with the future of Pearl Jam.
So I didn't click the link. I didn't read the article.
Uh-huh.
When you sent this story, I read the headline.
Uh-huh.
And my first opinion is, and maybe I'm off base, but I don't fucking care. They got this new album coming out. The first two songs are awesome.
Yes.
I'm so looking forward to listening to the album because it's taken me back to more along the lines of the early stuff.
Exactly.
It's
the first
raw.
Three albums,
It's heavy. And I'm very excited to see it. But they also have started scheduling tour dates.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I'm aware, maybe they've done some festival stuff, but it's the first time they've toured since COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they come here, they're playing at the Baltimore Arena.
Correct.
Which is a very small venue.
Yeah.
So the first thing I thought of when I see this is, okay, maybe they're not selling quite as many tickets for their shows as they were hoping. And this is a little kind of push to, this may be the last time we tour. This may be the last album we put out.
Right.
To try and generate some more interest. To me, I was thinking this is a marketing pitch.
Right. It's interesting that you're going there because I'm with you in that line. And I think that I like this story in comparison to the other two stories because we haven't really talked about this all too much. We've talked about final tours with bands.
Right.
And they seem to come out with more glam metal bands or classic rock bands that like to announce a final tour, but it's really not their final tour, right? So
it's the final tour till the next tour.
Exactly. It's the final tour, and they make millions off that final tour, and then they can take a couple years off and then refresh that pile of money again. But that's not grunge. That's not supposed to be grunge, right? Because grunge is supposed to be not caring as much about that money, not caring as much about, eyes in the audience that are in front of you. It's about the authenticity of the music and the authenticity of the experience. Yeah. And to me, if a grunge band then commits to a final tour, it should be the final tour, and I would say this, unfortunately, with a lot of those acts, they haven't had as much opportunity to come across this issue because of the tragedies that they've tended to end by. There's a lot of tragedy to how these bands have stopped becoming bands. But Pearl Jam hasn't fallen under that. They've gone through a litany of drummers, to some degree, but now they have Matt Cameron from Soundgarden. Yeah. By the way, so I have a friend that hangs up on this, Anders, that just insists that Matt Drummer has always been the drummer for Pearl Jam, and that is bullshit. He is Soundgarden and Soundgarden first. Chris Cornell discovered him. Pearl Jam has always maybe wanted him, and he has toured with them from time to time, but that was Soundgarden's drummer who eventually became Pearl Jam's drummer when Soundgarden wasn't around anymore. That is just fact, Anders.
Well, I mean, even Pearl Jam came out of the tragedy of Andrew Wood and Mother Love Bone. Right. So there is a little bit of that, but no, I completely get your point and I agree. It's just, to me, at least on the surface with the first couple songs that have been released, this album just seems like it's going to be huge.
Right.
And, why would you start saying this may be the last album unless you're just trying to kind of get the hype machine going, in my opinion.
Right. And maybe there's some wrestling with that. There's two quotes that I pulled. And the first was his explanation, of coming to an end. And so maybe there is some contemplation of Pearl Jam coming to an end. And you would expect that to be authentic and genuine, right? Because that really is kind of at least the mantra of grunge. So he's quoted as saying, "The goal is to keep making music. It's your passion, your special purpose. You lean on the relationships with the people who are still around. It really hits you when you're in a situation when that person would not be there or would be there, and you're sad for them when they are not." So I think that there's some allusion, to that. Could be a Chris Cornell, or Kurt Cobain, others that haven't been able to reach this point, like an aging point in their career. And he continues, but it makes you realize you got to be healthy. You want to be around for your kids. You want to make good records, and we might have one or two left. And there's a might in that. So Right. Is there a finality to what they're doing right now? And if so, like with those words, you would expect that to be genuine.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like that's to me the first grunge band that I will see like really kind of announcing a final tour. And so we'll have to kind of wait and see how that continues to play out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So I think like those first three stories in our heavy happenings were that they were heavy. So we were named maybe heavy, not in like the fun party heavy way, but in like a more serious, like coming to the end of your musical career kind of way. So that was too depressing or morbid for you. I'm sorry.
Nope.
You were good.
I'm good.
All right. This one's more whimsical, more fun. All right. So this is about Rockfest mosh pits. All right. You want to intro this one? You want me to?
Sure. So Rockfest 2024. I don't know where the location is.
It's in Wisconsin, but I want to get the town right. Oh, Cadott. Or is it Cadott? Cadott.
Are there umlauts?
There are no umlauts in that one. Cadott.
Yeah. So they came out and announced, the promoters announced that they are going to have non-mosh pit zones and specific mosh pit zones at Rockfest 2024.
Right. And this is not like, I would not say this is a metal fest. There's pop acts in this. So
I think it's fucking stupid, first of all. Any way you slice it, but I'm like, yeah, you're right. They're pop acts.
They're pop acts in this. But what I read is that, and I don't know this band, so Ronnie Radke of Falling in Reverse, so I do not know Falling in Reverse, called out the Rockfest crowd for being less than energetic during his band's performance. So evidently he is encouraging moshing.
Sure.
So maybe that's a heavier act that I need to know and I need to look up. So my apologies, for those that are fans for the band and for Ronnie Radke. I'm going to look this all up after, really kind of talking this up. But yeah, so it was shut down evidently. The moshing was completely closed, which is a weird thing to me too. So I get to Fishbone, because I'm a huge, enormous Fishbone fan. And there was an insistence on Fishbone for years that stage diving and moshing had to happen. And there was lawsuits around that. And Angelo Moore, he didn't care. He was going into the audience no matter how many lawsuits were thrown at him.
Sure.
And that's moshing though, right? Like moshing.
That's rock and roll.
And it's spontaneous. How can you have designated, I don't know, like, the mosh is just an uncontrolled emotional outlet and expression. Like as you're listening to, like, why would you slam into each other anyway? That's supposed to be the
during
expression.
Jelly Roll.
Yes, Jelly Roll is an act.
Jelly Roll is one of the headliners, and who is gonna mosh at a Jelly Roll show?
Right.
I think it kind of undermines the intelligence level of the music fan to say, well, and I get it, right? You got families.
Absolutely.
Kids that come to these shows. But I think there's a general understanding, if you're going to bring your kid to welcome to, Rocklahoma or welcome to Rockville and Slayer or Pantera.
You just say that word. Slayer is just a perfect example.
Yeah. I mean, Anthrax, these rock festivals have a mixture of bands, heavy bands that generally moshing is part of it, and other bands that aren't. Dirty Honey is playing at Rockfest.
Right.
You're
not going to see a mosh pit there.
You're not, but Beartooth, Killswitch Engage are bands that are also playing there. And there's probably going to be some moshing during those portions of the show.
Sure.
But it's like, I think people know they can work around an area if there's a group of people that are moshing, and it's all generally general admission anyway. Right. So it's like, okay, so now are you going to like fence it off and go, oh, you have to go in here if you want to mosh?
Right.
I don't think people are going to do that.
We've talked about crowd behavior and fan behavior. I have less of a problem with moshing than I do the assholes that get pissed off at you when you go to the bathroom and then walk back to the same spot that you were standing in. Like I have more of a problem with that than I do the actual
for sure
moshing.
Yeah, and I mean, then are you going to have is it going to get to the point where you have a crowd surfing section and a non-crowd surfing section?
Right, exactly.
It's like, it's just taking away from the spontaneity of live music, in my opinion.
That's how moshing was born. Like who would have known that people would have behaved that way?
Right.
It just kind of happened organically. And it should happen organically. I don't think there should be an expectation that you mosh at a Slayer show either.
No.
If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
No,
Yeah.
I agree. It's just, I found it kind of funny that it was this rock festival that was implementing this, because it's not, I mean, there are other ones that have a lot of
Exactly.
top to bottom heavy bands
Yes. Yeah.
where, you know, people might be offended that there's a mosh pit breaking out,
Yeah.
you know, every set.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. We'll have to see if there's a follow-up. Neither of us are going to Rockfest.
no.
If anybody that listens to this goes to Rockfest and gets the mosh experience, we'd love to hear from you.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. So whether that was the designated mosh area at Mosh Times was a success or not.
It's a pretty good lineup, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you just named Dirty Honey.
Of course.
You know that we would go that would.
They need to be
Madison
further
Hall.
up in the list, though.
Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, Aaron Jones.
Oh, I love Aaron Jones. I'm going to see him at the end of the month.
Yeah.
He's up at 98 Rock Fest in Baltimore.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm rolling up to there.
Yeah. The Who. Mm-hmm. That's a good new band. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Two Live Crew.
And when you mean the Who, you're talking about the Mongolian Who.
Correct.
So
Not
HU.
Not
yeah,
WHO.
just to clarify.
The Who.
Yes.
HU.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Two Live Crew.
You think they'll mosh during that?
I don't think so.
You know, like, you think anybody would be shocked by Two Live Crew anymore?
I don't know. I mean,
know, it used
they'd
to be
have
some
to take
shocking
it to
shit.
another level, I think.
All right. Yeah. Like, it's kind of funny. Like all of the raucousness. There we go.
Everything you want.
It was the Two Live Crew. I didn't realize there was a long
Yeah,
intro
like-
before the Misa horny
Yeah,
part.
that- of course. That's from a Full Metal Jacket, which I saw at this movie theater, just for the record. This building that is now not a movie theater, used to be a movie theater, and I saw that movie there.
And we got
awesome.
high school credit for coming to see it, too.
That's true. We did. We got credit for it, right? Right.
Extra credit. Don Darnell's history class. For sure.
All right.
Yeah. So, speaking of live music, we got a couple of things coming up here at the Salisbury Center. We've got Metal Up Manassas.
I love Manassas Sunday, which unfortunately we're going to miss.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to be in Nashville, so I'm gone for the weekend. So I have to miss that one, but I will be in for the next one that you're going
Right,
to.
which
we will be
is-
in.
Friday night Metal in Manassas on April the 19th.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Spotlight on Friday night. So we'll be here for that one. We'll chat up the bands and
Absolutely.
and check them out.
And if so, we have continued heavy happenings. We're going to know it.
Yeah. And then
Follow up.
we'll have some shows before then, but coming up in a couple weeks, we get to check out Armored Saint at the Tally Ho.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Can't wait. Headlining set.
Absolutely.
Gonna be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen and talking about bands going out and aging, that band has always been solid. I've never seen a bad Armored Saint show.
Yeah, and John Bush can sing his ass off
Beast.
still. So
Absolute beast. Great front man.
and seemingly no backing tracks. So
Right.
all good stuff.
Don't forget also May 2nd, we're opening up every Thursday. All the podcasts will be live. People
Yes.
can come downstairs to the front bar, enjoy all the shows. We'll come down and interact with them.
Yes.
Maybe bring some people
Yeah.
up.
Can buy us drinks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, John. I did forget about that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and then
That's going to be here before you know it. That's a month away.
It's wild that we're that close to May already.
Yeah.
that'll be the Thursday before we go to
the
M3
Rock Festival. Yeah. So
sir.
that'll be a big weekend just all across the board for us. And I'm sure we'll have good conversation about all that.
Yeah, that's why
You got the Child's Play.
Child's Play T-shirt.
Absolutely.
So, all right,
All right.
we good?
All good.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. We'll catch you next time on the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show.
Good job there, Kevin.
Thanks, man. It was fun. Yeah, always.
Yeah.